Hey everybody, today is Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Coming up on the show today, from Daredevil Born Again, editor Cedric Nairn-Smith.
We had already started on this show and we'd filmed 5 or 6 episodes at this point. And then for Dario and the writers to come in and retrofit the show with existing footage, I'd never really encountered anything like that before.
Editor Stephanie Filo.
It was like no Netflix anything, right? Because I know at one point we had tried to kind of tempt score with some Netflix Daredevil stuff, and like immediately they're like, take that out. Like, nope, absolutely not.
And editor Melissa Lawson-Chung.
They don't really want you to do anything that would be your instincts. They want you to go against your instincts, which is very challenging and also can be very fun.
Yes, all that and more on this edition of The Rough Cut. Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. I told you I'd be right here waiting for you, and here I am. And wait till you see who I have with me. Spoiler alert, they're editors. But not just any editors. We are talking about, and eventually talking to, the editors of Marvel's Daredevil Born Again. Returning to the Rough Cut for the third time is Cedric Nairn-Smith. Ced first dropped by back in 2020 to talk about his work on a different kind of superhero show, The Boys. 2 years later, Ced would return to talk about his first Marvel TV series, Moon Knight. So that's 2 times for Cedric. Joining Ced today is another return visitor, and that is Stephanie Filo. Steph was on the podcast in 2021 to talk about her work on a Black Lady sketch show. She would win an Emmy for her work not just on that year of the show, but in 2022 and 2023 as well. Rounding out our guest list today is a new entrant to the Rough Cut. Melissa Lawson-Chung is on today. Just like Ced, Melissa also had a Marvel TV series under her belt coming into Daredevil Born Again. She worked on Marvel's Secret Invasion. So very happy to have her making her debut on the podcast today. Daredevil Born Again is a revival and continuation of the TV series Daredevil, which ran for 3 seasons on Netflix. That show was pretty popular and, like most things superhero-related, had a well-invested fan base. So no small task jump-starting the franchise all over again on Disney+. But not to worry. Ced, Stephanie, and Melissa were all up to the challenge. And we will hear all about that challenge in just a moment. But first, a word from our sponsor. And that sponsor's Extreme Music, those overlords of premium production audio. I know that you work hard to shape every frame of your project, or at least you better, so why settle when it comes to the score? Extreme Music gives you real creative control without compromise. It is a massive library of top-tier production music from respected composers and artists, and that music is paired with the kind of smart tools editors actually need. First, you can search for the sounds you want using traditional metadata terms like tempo, genre, lyrics, composer, all that stuff. You can explore their catalog based on your scene description, using Extreme Music's artful intelligence. Or you can even upload a reference track to them, and they will hit you back with something that fits perfectly. But wait, there's more. With their stem mixer, you can adjust the instrument mix to suit your cut. And with multiple versions and links, you're not editing your edit to fit the music, you're fitting the music to your edit. And then when it's time to license those tracks, it's all handled right there on their website. No chasing down emails or contracts. So the next time you have a story to tell it with great music from Extreme Music. Okay, it's superhero time. And for that, we got some super editors. From Daredevil Born Again, here are Cedric Nairn-Smith, Stephanie Filo, and Melissa Lawson-Chung.
Can I say something about this?
Sure.
Or go first? Matt, edit that part out, please. The whole going first and all that. Just take all that out, please.
The energy level in the room here. It's just a flat line.
Sorry.
We're waiting for your first question.
Yeah.
Then fireworks.
Okay. That's what I'm here to do. I'm here to ask questions. And of course, where we usually start is about getting on the show, because that's what everybody wants to know about. Everybody's always curious about how to get these jobs. Ced, I know that you worked on Moon Knight because we talked about it. And Melissa, I believe you worked on Marvel's Secret Invasion. So that leaves you, Steph. Mm-hmm. I know you've done a lot of great stuff, but I don't think any Marvel or even superhero stuff. Although your aunt was in Flash Gordon, so that's kind of an immediate qualifier right there. But tell me about how you got the gig for Daredevil Born Again and what from your impressive resume you think might have helped you land the job.
So one of my OG mentors, Elizabeth, Ronald's daughter, actually introduced me to some of the heads of Marvel Post a few years back. And we all really got along, but schedule-wise, it just never worked out for us. And so when this show was coming up, the timing worked out perfectly. And I was a super fan of the Netflix show as well. So I was just like, good, I hope this is the one that I can like finally get over there and work with them. And as far as projects, I guess, that maybe helped, I did a lot of crime dramas coming up. And I think our original version of this was very much like court focused. So I think that helped a lot within my interview, just talking about past court footage and stuff that I had worked with before.
And Melissa, let's hear about the journey that led you to Daredevil and whether or not Secret Invasion played a big part in that.
I think it did, in the sense that it was something they wanted also to have a grounded approach to any kind of action sequences they had. I worked on one of the episodes of Secret Invasion where there was an ambush and cars were flipping, and it was a pretty large action sequence that we worked on for quite a while in previs. And I think they saw the advantage of that, being able to save time and possibly money to get that all sorted earlier on so that there was a strong plan once they went to go shoot. And so when they first approached Daredevil, it was court-based, but also, the grounded action that's more street level is part of their past, and they wanted to continue that, and now it's even more so.
When you say grounded and street level, what do you mean by that?
Well, what I mean by it is not flying through space visual effects in every piece of blue screen. This is more choreographed with a stunt coordinator and a second unit director and very planned out choreography.
That's a pretty good answer. I like that. Cedric.
Hey, Matt.
As I mentioned, you worked on Moon Knight.
Yes.
Wouldn't you know it, Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead were directors on Moon Knight. Justin and Aaron were brought in to direct on Daredevil Born Again as well. Was it Moon Knight that was the main factor for you joining this series, or were there other things that got you this job?
So all of this was percolating around the time of the strikes. And so I was on another project here at Marvel after Moon Knight that was sort of getting caught up in all of the strikes and all of the shutdowns, and development was kind of getting slowed. And so I was on a show that was sort of like they were trying to figure out where to go with the show. And so it was kind of in a lull for like a short period of time. And so one day someone came into my office and said, hey, how would you like to go work on Daredevil? And we were at this standstill on this other show. And I said, well, yeah, of course, I'd love to. And I think Melissa and Steph, you guys were already on, right?
I wasn't. I actually came on a little bit later, but remember you were kind of helping out because I got put on something else for a little while, and then you came on.
Yeah, there was a lot of transition going on because of all the strikes and everything, and a lot of uncertainty. So there was a little bit of downtime. So they asked if I wanted to do Daredevil, and so I came over, and I had like the later block for what will we call this, part 1 of Daredevil?
Yeah, OG.
There's the OG. This is the OG 2.
Yeah.
It seems like there was a bit of a staggered process for onboarding the three of you.
Yeah.
Tell me about the first meeting, if there was sort of a first meeting amongst the three of you, and what you get together to talk about as co-editors on a project. What are the things you need to hash out together before you really get into this series?
Mostly gossip.
Yeah.
I know. Can we say?
We have a text chain that, can be dormant for days and days, but then something will happen, then it just goes off, and then it'll just be a steady stream of, gossip. Mm-hmm. I was trying to think of the right term.
Yeah, I feel like in OG version, especially, we would like just check in with each other all the time. Especially, I know Cedric and I had episodes that kind of had characters that overlapped a little, and we were trying to kind of figure out what to do with those. So I feel like there was a lot of just brainstorming on that front.
Yeah.
Did we ever have just like the three of us in one spot?
Well, we used to actually have time to go to lunch together. Remember that?
Yeah. That was nice.
Lunch is important. Well, regardless of when you met or who started first, two of you have done Marvel projects before. Was there any sort of onboarding process for Steph? Sort of like, hey, let me tell you how this usually goes on these things, or how this might be different from other projects you've done?
I don't think so. You guys could speak to that more.
Yeah. I was like 5 weeks later because they pulled me on something else for a little bit. So Cedric and her were together. I don't know. What did you guys discuss?
So the onboarding process here, I'm sure you've interviewed other Marvel editors. The onboarding process is unlike anything that I've experienced anywhere else. Now that I've done a few, I don't really think about it. But the onboarding in the beginning can be a little bit overwhelming because there's so many protocols with security and all the separate accounts. And I'm sure it's like this at other places, but it's pretty significant here. at least with Moon Knight, I mean, the first like week or two, it was just me trying to sort out where I was exactly with this onboarding process. And then you feel like you're not able to do what you are accustomed to doing because you have to go through all these steps, you know? And also if you work from home, which I don't do that much, partly because of that reason. And also because I have 2 dogs that won't shut up. So.
I think it took me 2 years to realize there was an Avid team and a tech team, and they were not. They keep saying, well, that's a question for the Avid team. And I thought, I didn't really realize there was, so there's a lot of different departments. And
I only just figured that out like a few weeks ago as well. I was like, wait, there's 2 different teams. I think also like the workflows at Marvel also are just a little different. So it was just like, for me, I think I asked Ced and Melissa just random questions because I think elsewhere teams might not be as big. You might not have as much support, but it's like about figuring out, I guess, where I go for what thing.
Mm-hmm.
There were some shifts that took place in the series once it was initially underway. And I think one of the questions that was being posed going into developing it was how closely to match the tone and the arc of the Daredevil series that ran on Netflix. Initially, I think the feeling was to take the series in a lighter direction, but ultimately the show took on a darker tone. How did the shift actually affect you and change the direction of any work you had done up to that point?
Who wants to go first?
One of my episodes, I think, is like the one that had the most kind of surgery because it wasn't fully flushed out in the OG version. And so it had a lot of additional photography, but then also just trying to match it to, basically Benson and Moorhead came in and shot a new pilot that Ced had cut. And so it was like trying to figure out a way to match that old footage to the new footage and figure out like tonally and sensory moment wise how that would match. There's one scene in episode 4 with Matt and Frank, the Punisher, that used to be in one of Cedric's episodes, and it was about something totally different. It was like about Muse. And now it's like Matt comes in and is talking about the shell casing that was found at where White Tiger was killed. And so it was a lot of just kind of that, like threading the needle of trying to figure out how to make all of the new storylines fit in with the old.
We got a pretty amazing beat sheet from Dario, the showrunner that was brought in, that pretty much was a breakdown of what his plan was going to be with integrating the new with the old. And it was pretty amazing, the puzzle pieces he put together on paper just to even explain what his plan was going to be. Some really amazing ideas to just make certain scenes, like she said, maybe meant something else, or having them move around have a different impact because of what is now happening before that they shot new. And then, of course, we had 3 new episodes that had come in just because they hadn't finished shooting, that were all with Benson and Moorhead and Dario writing it, that had the darker tone, and then splicing that through all the other episodes so that it didn't stand out too much.
That beat sheet, I'd love to know what that looked like. How do you visualize, either through images or through text, how to make all these changes and how to make everything line up?
It was all just text, like a writer, almost like as if when when you're in a writer's room and they have all the bubbles and the story points, but it was all just listed out. It may not even have been for us. It was probably for executives to look at, but it was so helpful for us to see what the plan was because it was really impressive, but also because it helped us know why they were doing each thing they were doing when they were shooting any new scenes.
We did a lot of conformed edits as well. At least I know for my episodes. I think you guys did that as well, where it's like, here's the idea we have. Let's try to just lay out the order of these scenes and just let it play out. And we would send to the writers while they were working to see what stuck and what didn't.
And I think the other thing that changed was it was a shift from sort of a more episodic model to sort of a more serialized model. How did that play out for the 3 of you?
I mean, there must be other shows where they've done this, but probably in the writing phase. But to do it during production, or usually like in the old model, you have a pilot and you test the pilot and then you order a full season. And that's such an old model that rarely happens anywhere else. But we had already started on this show and we'd filmed 5 or 6 episodes at this point. And then for Dario and the writers to come in and retrofit the show with existing footage, I'd never really encountered anything like that before. And I went from like a law procedural to this limited series type of show. It was pretty miraculous to pull that off.
I think we were all excited because I think we all either became or were fans of the original. So seeing everyone embrace it was exciting and welcomed.
This happens from time to time. And generally when it does, there's kind of a clean sweep. And the fact that you all are still on the show at the very end has to speak to what they thought of your work, what they thought of you as editors. That's a very cool thing of Marvel, and I think you should all be pretty proud of yourself. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
Usually we would be the first to go.
Yeah.
No, really.
I don't think I thought about that fully until somebody asked me at a party. They were like, "Oh, so you're still there?" And I was like, "Oh my God, you're right.
Yeah.
I am still there."
So what were the challenges of not just recalibrating the tone of the series into the dark, but also keeping on top of how a character, like, for example, Kingpin, he's supposedly redeemed and he's trying to present himself as I'm a better man now and I'm a responsible man. I'm going to be a good civic leader. But of course, he's the Kingpin. He's a bad guy. So you've got to sort of unspool that over the course of the series so that it's not just one big, yeah, he's still the bad guy. And you have a disruption like this, that kind of messes with your arc.
I know, like, we would look at each episode and like, okay, where is this character at this point in time? Because by Kingpin, for example, or Fisk, for example, the first time you see him as Kingpin is in episode 8, that gala, when he walks out in his like full white tux. It's like, oh, he's back, right? But it's like you have to see what elements lead him there. Like in episode 4, as an example, it's like you see him doing his mayorly duties and just hates them, and he's getting sung to all the time. And then, by the time we get to Cedric's, I think it's episode 6, he has that amazing intercut where you kind of see their natures are coming out, towards the end of the episode. So I think it was a matter of like tracking per episode where each character should be. For me, like episode 8, that's where Matt's really like on tilt before he gets into the finale. So just trying to find ways to make his performance build in that way over time.
So most editors, they have their own system for tracking the story beats, typically the 3x5 cards on the wall, or some people are a little more modern and do it digitally. In this situation where you're building out a whole new show, is it a similar thing? Like you have my OG cards, then you have the new cards, you have a mix of the two? In your Avid, do you have, well, here's my original cut and here's the one I'm working on, and you go back and forth to reference? How do you manage that from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, we had both. Mm-hmm. We have the cards. They have them on these wheeled walls.
The whiteboard with the cards, yeah.
Yeah.
You can wheel them around, and they have each episode on them. And, they're, of course, in a room with locked down. But it has the story where you can move it around. And I had some in my office, too. Talking about Wilson Fisk, there was one episode earlier on in the OG phase where he wasn't in there quite enough. And so I put a marker so I could sit back and see each time Wilson Fisk was shown, because I thought, oh, he's not in this episode very much. And so it helped me see with the stickers how often he was there. But yeah, they have the cards, and then we have all our cuts.
And there was a lot of trial and error.
Yes.
We have a common screening room where we would all get in there together and we would be there for the reviews, mostly with Brad Winterbaum, moving the cards around on the board and trying to restructure the shows. Each time that we would go in there, we think we were getting closer to a resolution. And, like, oh, okay, this structure will really help us. And we'd go back and try it. We'd show it again later, and it wouldn't work. And I was just thinking, was it Dark Knight Rises when Bruce Wayne is trying to climb out of that cave, And it was very similar to that. We were like trying to climb out of this cave and try to crack these episodes. And we would like take these huge swings. There were so many huge swings that we took. And sometimes we wouldn't make it to the top, but eventually we did. Eventually we got out of the hole.
I have read that the show did not want to dwell too much on past events or run the risk of alienating new viewers who did not watch the Netflix series. That said, one of the cool things about doing these franchises is you have past IP to reference. Did any of you reference any previous versions of Daredevil when shaping your approach, or were you pretty much encouraged to find a completely new rhythm?
I think in the OG version, it was like no Netflix anything, right? Because I know at one point we had tried to kind of tempt score with some Netflix Daredevil stuff, and like immediately they're like, take that out. Like, nope, absolutely not. And then once we kind of came back just for the new version, it was like, okay, just everyone watch the Netflix one, like get back in the swing of that series. And so we kind of had more free reign to try to hone in on what it used to be, which was nice.
So in addition to the shift in the direction of the show, you also had the disruption of the strike. You mentioned that, but I didn't really follow up, and I should have. Where were you in the process when that happened, and what kind of impact did that have on you?
So as the strikes were ramping up, we were filming in New York, and the protesters and the picketers, their efforts were sort of escalating, and they were getting more and more in your face. And so production, as a countermeasure, went from shooting outside in the real world and bringing everything inside. So things start to feel like they are shot on a set. As we get deeper and deeper into the OG, it went from this show that had a lot of scale and was outdoors to going and shooting everything interiors. You probably wouldn't pick up on it unless you were looking for this, but it just started to get sort of like a set. We tried to continue shooting for as long as we could. And then ultimately, once the strike officially shut us all down, the writers and it was the writers and the actors, then it was over. Mm-hmm. But we tried to prolong production as long as we could.
Yeah.
We were put on a hiatus.
Because they had filmed 6 episodes, I think, at that point. We were able to still work a little bit in post, but because our showrunners were also the writers, it's they couldn't really give the notes that needed to be given. So I think that also kind of just led to, we got to shut down and just reevaluate.
The series initially was going to be an 18-episode first season. Then it gets split into 2 seasons, so that right there you think, oh, that cuts the work in half. But then, of course, the strike combined with the shift in direction. I don't know what the original release date was for the series, but did it feel like you guys were just always under the gun because you had a lot of catching up to do?
It always feels like we don't have enough time.
That's a good point.
Regardless if there was a strike or no strike, or they gave us all the time in the world, it always feels like there's not enough time, even when there's a significant amount of time.
Because there's a lot of trial and error. Try this while we're waiting for that. Let's try to do this and that. So it's not usually a sit and wait too much, but there was a little bit.
Yeah.
You get the situation where the pilot isn't the pilot. You have to go out and create a new pilot. And usually the pilot is all about not just setting the context of the world building, but also the visual language and the style of the show. Said you ended up cutting what would end up being the first episode.
Right.
But were you sort of following a style that was already in place? Did you feel like you had an opportunity to define things on your own? Or was it kind of like, okay, this is where we're at now, and so when you do that first episode, it's going to fall in line with what we've already done?
No, the pilot or the new pilot and the last 2 episodes feel distinctly different from the show. I mean, I can't sugarcoat that or say that. Those 3 episodes feel very different from the other episodes. And a lot of that has to do with Justin and Aaron's style, which they did so well with Moon Knight and Loki. The other thing that was missing from the OG was the suit. And so when Dario and the writers got together to reform the show, let's get the suit in there. And so that's why you see the suit at the top of the episode. And so it was like a whole new ballgame once Justin and Aaron came on board. When you're working with good directors, they're telling the story through the camera, there's not a lot of guesswork. And I could sort of tell what they were going for. I don't know if Steph, Melissa, if that's your experience too, but you can kind of tell what their intentions are. That's not always the case when you've got 3 cameras spraying it down, and it's there's 3 different openings, 5 different endings to a scene. That was not the case with Justin and Aaron. They go in there with very specific intentions, and it's more about doing no harm.
That was a refreshing thing because it kind of, the footage always kind of dictates what it wants to be. And so it was nice having something that felt really intentional and focused on this new vision.
It's intentional, but I feel like Justin and Aaron both also like to play with editing a lot. And they don't really want you to do anything that would be your instincts. They want you to go against your instincts, which is very challenging and also can be very fun.
Melissa, this is twice now you've said something where I feel I just absolutely have to ask you to explain it further. Sorry. Playing with editing and going against your instincts. Maybe I can't ask for an example, but what does that really mean?
I can give an example.
I would love that.
It's a pretty simple example that's not across the board for them because it's pretty much they want you to be trying different things that you wouldn't normally go for. But an example would be, if the camera's panning around and we're missing the person talking, that's okay. We're going to look at the reactions for a while. We'll get to them when we get to them. Right now, it's cool to see what the reactions are. It's a very moody, cool camera move that's telling, like Steph said, part of the story with maybe who it's focusing on and how slow it's moving in. It just had the camera was part of the storytelling for sure. That's one of the examples. Another one would be with the fight sequences in the finale. They really wanted it to not be something everyone sees all of the time, to show the trauma and the Punisher in a new light. All the slow motion on Punisher for his fight sequence was supposed to show the trauma, and what he's doing isn't cool. What he's doing is awful. And it's hard to not have his character just look cool. But I think with the music and the tone and the color and the camera work and the slow motion, it did have a tone to it that was, he's always going to look cool, but it definitely had a darker tone to what it is you're watching here. You're not saying you should go out and do this. You're saying, wow, what has he gone through to get to this point at each step of the way throughout the fight, I think was their goal.
This is a small thing too, but like there's a lot of times where we see Fisk looking uncomfortably at either the camera or somebody else, and we'll hold for like, standard is like a second or something, but we would just like elongate these long stares where they're completely uncomfortable. And that was something that can be attributed to those guys, like this very imposing guy, intimidating man, just like looking at you. And he's trying to like look like Mayor Fisk, but he's really Kingpin. So that went a long way in multiple episodes.
Yeah, they like the awkwardness of some of the things, which is really cool.
Yeah. They're also like really keenly focused on sound as a storytelling device, which I liked as well.
Yes.
Like in episode 8, for example, we have Bullseye has his tooth attack. He like launches his tooth at a security guard. And so there was so much like focus on what does it sound like when he's like messing with his mouth here? Like what would that sound like if he's knocking his tooth out? So like little things like that, or as he's, these are all spoilers, I'm sorry, but as he's escaped the prison, he's like walking out and there's just like a crazy amount of wind out there, which like just looking at it, you wouldn't think of that, but it was just an interesting way to like add depth to those moments.
So they like to play with sound design. I mean, Matt Murdock, that plays a key aspect too. When he's like detecting things happening, you have to give that a little treatment. How did you come up with what it's going to look and sound like and feel like when he's listening in on something really critical?
That was an evolution.
Yeah.
That was a lot of trial and error, but it was a lot of it was to keep it diegetic and grounded in the real world. Like, there is sound design in it, but it's not like we're hearing sci-fi sounds or things like that, or if it does sound a bit sound designy, it's combining a lot of sounds to make it sound otherworldly. Like when he's tuning. One of the things they did too is they introduced that what we call the grande sort of sensory moment where it goes full frame and then goes into this like letterbox thing. Justin and Aaron, they brought a lot to making Daredevil special.
Why do they call it grande?
That's just our internal. It's not really known out there.
Because it takes over the screen, it opens up, maybe?
Yeah.
That's my guess.
So we call it a grande sensory moment or a petite sensory moment, so.
Ooh.
Visual effects always has like code names.
Yeah, we had a lot of like those, just interesting names for things. Because what do we call B-roll again? It was like holy moments.
Oh yeah, holy moments.
Holy moments.
Yeah.
Which works for Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, it made sense.
It's funny because when you work in a show with a lot of visual effects, they have the codes for shot numbers, but it's really funny to find out what those codes mean because it's usually a silly way to just find 3 letters that like, sometimes are a little bit of a joke.
So I think we're learning a lot about this show. We've teased out grande, grounded, street level, and awkward. I think though, how would you describe Daredevil?
That's us.
Those could be your superhero names. Each of you gets to be grounded, street level, and awkward.
Yes. I'll be the awkward.
Could we all just be all 3?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yes. Okay. I tell you.
It's your show. Be what you want to be. Let's talk about actual working aspects. I know the show was shot in New York. Seth already mentioned your magical whiteboard on wheels for how you track story. Where were you each cutting? This is an easy one.
Where were we cutting?
So I really enjoy working on the lot with my 2 assistants. I just like the interaction. I come from a cutting room with like film and track. That I started out as a film assistant, and I just like being around that hub of energy, creativity, and being here on the lot. I've worked in some terrible places that I wouldn't even call post-production facilities. I worked out a place in the Valley that it looked like a homicide had been committed there. I mean, it was just horrifying. It was a great show though. It was a great show, but you never would have known it was cut in this, like, it looked like a barn. I don't know, in like the industrial part of the Valley. But, it's like such a great facility here. And so I always enjoy coming here and working with Travis and Yanni and just being here and going to the commissary for lunch, with our voucher. And then if I work from home, it's never good because my dogs they yap all day long, and they're angels at night, but during the day they're terrible.
I actually love working from home for if I'm in dailies, because I just feel like I get so distracted if I'm like on the lot or around other people that I'm like, I'm just going to hunker down and like focus on this. But otherwise, I like being kind of in person when I can.
Yeah, it's hybrid for me. I mix it up. My husband never knows. He's like, are you going in today? Are you going in tomorrow? I don't know. We'll find out.
This is going to seem like a random question, but it's inspired by a conversation I had with Ced yesterday. What is your I think he probably knows where we're going with this.
Yeah.
What is your favorite part of post, and what is your least favorite part of post?
I'll go first. Dailies, not my favorite part of the process.
You don't say.
Yeah, dailies are not my favorite part of the process. You're trying to breathe life into hours and hours of footage. When it gets to the screen, it looks natural, but when you're watching dailies nowadays, especially I'm kind of dating myself, but like film, you can't shoot endless takes unless you're certain directors. But you have your circle takes, and those are what wind up in the cutting room. With digital, no one even yells a cut anymore. So you've just got these really long takes. And this is true of all editors in this industry. This is not, unique to Daredevil, but you have these endlessly long takes, and if sometimes they bridge multiple scenes, and it's just like sifting through all that stuff. You have to have a really keen attention span to go through that and really look for the gold. And I only just watched the last take. I'll just be honest. No, that's not true. Please edit that out. Just edit that out. No, you have to watch all the takes, even the non-circled ones. You don't know if the script supervisor is circling those takes or if the director is. You don't know. And, and then if you ask that question, sometimes the director will say, well, you should look at all the takes. So, so we as editors look at all the takes. This is true.
That's why it's painful, actually.
Yeah.
It's because you can't start editing. You have to just watch it all. But that's what makes you experience what they experienced on set. You get to really see everything they went through and know all their intentions. But it is physically painful, is what I usually say, to do that part of the process.
Yeah. But then once you have the scene up on its feet, that's when it's fun. So watching the dailies and like trying to, just block the scene together, that's painful. Once you see it and you see how, like, usually in my case, how bad it is originally, then you say, okay, why isn't this working? Why isn't that working? Why is this working? When it's up on its feet, it's fun to change and then you're moving. But I only know of a few editors that can just like cut whole cloth from the beginning to end in their first pass.
So anybody listening that's wondering why this show is so short, they've missed all the times you guys have said, just cut that part out.
Yeah. Matt, can you actually take that part out too?
Yeah, the editors want you to edit this down a lot.
Yeah.
Can we have a pass at your pass?
I'll just send you the recording and you guys can edit it.
Yeah, we'll watch all the dailies of it.
Yeah.
See how painful that is. I've heard about your infamous text chain and how you guys like to gossip, and I can certainly see that just in our short conversation today. But did you have any opportunities to observe one another and possibly learn something from each other?
Something I really like that they do at Marvel is like anytime there's a like Kevin Feige screening, we all have access to watch it just via Zoom, but we can at least like kind of hear the notes and feedback and be as on top of it as we can. I thought that was like a really special thing because you don't always get that elsewhere.
Yeah, it's funny. My first thought on that when I first started at Marvel, I was, it's just a lot of eyes on you when you're doing your screening.
That too.
They even have the bell. Shame.
Yep.
Shame. When you go into the screening
So
room.
my first thought wasn't excitement, but now I get it. And it's really, really helpful. But at first I was like, wait, why does everybody have to watch me go through this?
It is like really intense when you're the one in the hot seat because you're like, how many? There's like 45 people on this Zoom. Like, who? What? Everyone's gonna judge me. But yeah.
But it's really helpful.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to say one thing about Steph and Melissa, like conversations we had. Melissa, the courtroom scenes in episodes 2 and 3, I just loved the way that they were put together. And we were talking about like, gosh, I was really trying to figure out how she did it. And because I just love just how the dialogue is just running through the whole thing, and we're with different people while the dialogue is running. We're on all the people in the courtroom, and it all just feels so cohesive. Do you remember this? It was like we said it was like you were in a fever dream, like you're just like,
yeah.
I don't know how I did. I was in the zone and I put it together and it just felt really good, but that stood out to me just talking about those courtroom scenes, which I just thought were just so well put together. And then Steph's, when we as editors, when we're in the temp process, we can use any music that we like. And we can really push the boundaries of what would be cool to use. And episode 8, it was incredible the way that Steph temped it. It had a lot of Miles Davis, and it had such a tone to it that just going in and out of the score and the Miles Davis was like incredible. And then, we don't have the budget for Miles, so it turned into something else.
Well, there's also the bullseye. I mean, the theme was, I think, birthed from her temp, I feel.
Oh, yeah, the strings for Bullseye. We tempt that with, Matt, have you ever seen a movie called EO? It's like a donkey movie.
You're like the third person to ask me that today. No, I haven't.
That's what we tempt that with. There's just like these really like kind of eerie strings that just felt appropriate for Bullseye.
And the Newton brothers, of course, made it this beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But she had that something that could stand out for him amongst all the other themes, and his is very unique. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, donkey score. Who knew?
I am a fan of the donkey movie genre as a whole, so I will have to check that out. I'm going to edit that out moment. Okay. I'll leave it in. From a scoring perspective, you got to work with the Newton brothers for the score, which is very cool. But in terms of how you approach using temp score, some editors take the position like, I cut the scene first. I don't want music to influence me whatsoever. And others are like, no, the music is really what helps tell the story. It helps guide my cut. Which way do the three of you go on that?
I think for here at Marvel, like music is an integral part of the storytelling. So it goes hand in hand. I've worked on other shows where I don't want to score at all, and less is more. I think here we like to lean into music. And so I'm always trying to find the perfect complement to a scene. So I'm looking for it almost like at the same time or right away. And we like to try a lot of different things, It may start out as a thriller and then it ends up like a horror or vice versa. Or, we try to tempt things differently just to see like what really makes the scene sing.
It's funny, I've heard editors say that they always do it one way and always do it another way, and I do mix it up. It always makes me feel like, oh, am I supposed to pick one? Am I always supposed to do it? Why does it have to be one way or the other? So I actually, I think it just based on if I'm having it just on a feeling. So there's some even fight sequences that I will not put music in, and then suddenly they say, oh, let's put music in this, and then we try to make it work with just sound effects first to make sure it's, you understand what's happening and the geography of everything. Because music can kind of sometimes sway you in a way that makes you think it's working when it's not. But also sometimes if I'm feeling stuck or I'm feeling like I just need motivation, putting music in just helps me edit faster. And, if I really want to make sure it's working, I can turn it off or mute it, which is what I do sometimes is I'll just hit the mute button and watch the fight sequence and make sure that, or dialogue too. Dialogue, I think I don't put music in until after I'm done cutting at least the first pass.
Wait a minute. The Avid has a mute button? Wait, what?
Yeah.
What?
It's on a little box.
I think also some scenes like warrant just cutting with music, like the gala stuff in episode 8 that Cedric mentioned, like all of that felt like it needed to be cut to something, even if it wasn't the permanent thing. It's like I just wanted to make sure it felt like they're actually physically in this space. So things like that, I feel like I always will cut with music. And that one evolved so much. I know Cedric mentioned the Miles version. There's like a Bad Wedding Band YouTube version. There's so many. I think there's a David Lynch version. We had like some just David Lynch under the whole gala. But it's always fun to temp with it.
Well, I know time is a factor here. It always is. But I thought as we close things out, what I would do is, you've already paid each other compliments about things you liked about what the other editor did. For each of you, just give me your favorite scene that you worked on in the series.
My favorite scene was the diner scene in the pilot, Fisk and Matt. Those two, they were just great together. And less cutting is always more preferable. And I thought, is there a version where I don't do as much cutting? And I went in and I tried to retool it and I broke it, And so I was really happy with how that turned out. I was also happy with the intercut of the Fisk fight and the Daredevil Muse fight. There was a toss up between those two scenes for me.
The diner scene, as a fan watching it, that was like, I said this before. I was like, don't touch it. It's so perfect. I love it. I want it longer.
Thank you, Melissa.
Okay, Melissa, Steph, how about you? What are your favorites?
My favorite as a fan is with Karen and Punisher. I have a strange, fanatic thing about their character with Matt and the three of them together in the bunker after she arrives in the finale. I do love cutting action, and I love cutting a lot of the other dialogue scenes, but that one in particular I kept going back to because I wanted to get it perfect because it was very important to me. Even when I first read the script that the three of them were going to be together and that Matt was going to sense that she had been closer to Punisher from the Punisher series, and I had watched all of that, and that was my favorite.
Okay. Steph?
I think my favorite, and I talked about it already, is the gala sequence in episode 8. It was really daunting to come into because I was like, I need to get this right somehow. And I'm just really proud of where it landed and the collaboration that it took to kind of get it to that place. And my other one would be Fisk in episode 4, Fisk in the Latvian Heritage Center when they're singing, singing, "We built this city" to him. There's a much longer version of that as well, because he used to give a speech and try to speak Latvian as well. But that one was a fun one to figure out.
Those are all good examples. Aside from the work that's evident on the screen that you did, again, I hope people could take away just how flexible you had to be and just roll with the punches and roll with the changes, because that's what editors do. You all did a great job. I got more things that we could talk about, but as I understand it, you have another interview to go to, which I'm not hurt. That's cool. You can go. We could have stayed and hung out and had fun. Uh-huh. We were going to play Truth or Daredevil. It would have been cool, but maybe next time.
Yes.
Thank you, Matt. How come we've never thought of that, Truth or Daredevil?
I know. We might steal that.
Missed opportunities.
We'll take credit for that.
Truth or Daredevil? Yep. Don't worry, kids. I got plenty more where that came from. It can't be helped. I hope you all had fun meeting and learning from Ced, Melissa, and Steph today. I did. They are fun people and terrific editors. A big rough cut thank you to all of them for dropping by today. They are welcome back anytime. I hope you know that you are always welcome to drop by avid.com to see what's new with Media Composer. In fact, I think there's an update coming up real soon with even more improvements and features to help you be a happier, more productive editor. Well, at the very least, more productive. But it stands to reason that if you're more productive, you'll do better work and get home on time. And that's got to make you happy. Unless things aren't so good at home. And then it's that much more important you enjoy your work. And Media Composer is the best way to do that. You see how I turned it around there? So as soon as this podcast is done, why don't you turn around and hit the Media Composer page on avid.com. You know how I hate to say goodbye, but say it we must. I'm all out of show for you today. Gotta go make some more. You go do whatever you do when you're not here. And whatever it is, have fun and do it well. So until we meet again, this is Matt Fury thanking you for joining me right here on The Rough Cut.